house. Chris, you won't mess it up.
I was going to, right. Represent. I'm Perry Bacon. I'm a writer at the New Republic. Chris Rabb is a state representative from Pennsylvania who just won a very competitive primary. Chris Deluzio is a congressman from Pennsylvania. Has talked a lot about economic populism and economic nationalism, and I think most people in the audience know who these guys are, so we will get started with the panel of Chris's from Pennsylvania right now. So with that, I guess my first question is, I know we're going to talk about Philadelphia and Pittsburgh later, but I want to talk about London and New York City first. So we had two big things in politics happen. Starmer's government sort of collapsing in Britain, and then the New York primaries last night where the sort of more insurgent candidates won. So I want to talk to you guys about what you see about one. Maybe you haven't studied Britain that much, but one or both. What do those things mean? What do they tell you about politics? I'll start with Chris from Pittsburgh first.
Great to be here. Look forward to having you join us in the House, Chris. Look, far be it from me to understand British politics, but I do think there's a lesson there. Folks expect you to do something when the trajectory of the country has gone like this. And tinkering and incremental change, it isn't going to do it. If you're looking to attack the little symptoms of consolidated power without addressing that power, you aren't going to fundamentally turn the ship around. And again, I'm not some expert on what's gone on with the Tories and Labour and all the rest, but I sense that the Prime Minister's approach was milquetoast. It was weak. It didn't address what I think has been decline in much of the western part of Europe and our country to fundamentally change that if you're working hard, that pays off, that you can afford your life, that there has been consolidation and globalization has gutted out a lot of the industrial base in England, in our country. I think that's a big part of the story there. I know there are some nuances of their system, but I think that's a big part of it, and it says something about our own politics.
Anything else about New York?
Oh, New York! My gosh, yeah. Look, I see the mayor go 3-0 last night in a big way. I mean, Chris, your race, I think you probably have some insights on what's gone on in Philadelphia there too. I won't speak for you, but look, I think there is a reckoning on whether you are someone who is willing to really fight hard about that big substantial change, that structural change taking on the power in this country that has really ripped people off. I think Israel politics are certainly a part of that too. But those results weren't even close, really. I think they tell us a lot.
Well, I was in New York yesterday. I was there supporting the two women who were running. I had Claire Valdez and Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, and we were all endorsed by Justice Democrats, and so we had built up a rapport over months, and we were helping each other, kind of like a support, like therapy, essentially, because we were being brutalized for months. So we built up this rapport, and leading up to New York, that we had some real defeats in Illinois, North Carolina, a close one in North Carolina, and mine was the next one, the big one, May 19th, because I was running in the bluest congressional district in the entire nation. And it was a majority black district, and I was running against two establishment candidates. And so everyone was looking to my race. And we pulled it off. We won by 15 points, and it was a collaborative effort. It was grassroots. 90% of my donors were small donors, and that helped kind of create this momentum that really helped these other candidates feel, oh yeah, we can do this too. So I went back. I went to help other candidates, and I went to New York. And I went back on Tuesday, and I told Dari and Claire, there is no, you can't buy enthusiasm. You can't do it. Elon Musk's billions cannot buy enthusiasm. When you have that type of outpouring of volunteer support in the rain, that is telling you something. Breathe. That's what I told them. And then they won. And when I was leaving, there was something called Gen Z for Change. They had this big rally for them, and Brad Lander was there, and he's great. And as I was leaving, this woman said, I really appreciated what you said on the stage. I said, where are you from? She goes, I'm from London. Right? So connecting the dots here. And I said, wow. She goes, yeah, we're following with all of your races. And we're so inspired. We need this in London. We're not feeling the love, but we are feeling what you all are doing in the States, particularly those of you who are running with a bold, progressive vision, for society. And that really moved me. And it reminded me that these candidates and campaigns are truly rooted in movement that transcend traditional boundaries, geography, even ideology to some extent, because there's a lot of people who are feeling numb. And when they see people who are speaking truth to power, but it's not like poll tested, like they're speaking their truth, they're speaking out of lived experience. It resonates with people in ways that I have not seen, having been in politics for a long time now. And that is something that really has to be cultivated in non-cynical ways. And figuring out what that looks like, is the next step, because it's great that many of these progressive candidates have won their primaries and will likely win in the general. In my district, we have more raccoons than Republicans, so I think I'm safe. But the question is how to govern as a progressive. It's one thing to campaign. It's much harder to govern, and I've been in the legislature 10 years, and it has been a tricky, challenging job.
I'm going to come to governing in a second. Let me ask one more political-ish question. So Kamala Harris probably won both of your districts, but lost Pennsylvania. So talk about why you won and why you won your district and why Kamala Harris lost. And I'll start with you, Chris.
Well, in my legislative district, so I serve in the largest full-time state legislature in the country. In my district of 70,000 people, 4 neighborhoods in Northwest Philly, had the highest voter turnout for Kamala Harris. It's a majority black, mixed income district. And generally speaking, the black electorate is pretty darn wise. And it was a pretty easy choice. And because we're closest to the pain. And the electorate in my district is disproportionately older and female within the African American community, which is the highest voter turnout, Americans, right? So there was no surprise there. I did not endorse her, although she didn't ask me to, but I made sure that people came out. And I made a choice to say, look, I know there's a lot of progressives and young people who are very challenged in this moment. They do not like Trump. But the argument I tried to make was, sometimes there's people on the ballots who you just love, you vibe with. Most times, not so much. And when you have a choice between what some may call the lesser of two evils, then the opportunity is to say, who do you think you can hold to account? And that was clearly Kamala Harris. She would take your meeting. Donald Trump, not so much. And so I think that narrative and that way to understand one's power, individual and collective electoral power, facilitated better choices.
This is a great discussion because you're going to get the insights from 2 different parts of the states and 2 different districts. And I think some parts of the story will be similar. So background, my district, part of Allegheny County, I don't have the city of Pittsburgh, all of Beaver County. I mean, the partisan voter index, I think in 2024, my district was even. It's now maybe D plus 2 or 3. Kamala Harris narrowly won it, but did worse than Joe Biden did in 2020. And in the
Probably
Beaver...
worse than you.
I'm sorry?
Probably worse than
I
you.
ran ahead of her, especially in Beaver County part of my district, where Donald Trump had swung it more his direction. And so, you saw slippage in my district, similar to what I think happened statewide in Pennsylvania. Yep. And I got a bunch of theories, but one of them, which I think maybe comes back even to your first question, and is about what I think a lot of the discussion is today, what lessons should the establishment be taking from 24, from the elections we just saw? I keep seeing a lot of Democrats who would love for our party's solution to everything just be to point out how bad Donald Trump is. And I say that, I say that as a guy who, he called for my arrest and hanging and tried to throw me in prison. And it is clear to me that just being opposed to Donald Trump is not enough. You have to have a strong and bold and clear vision for what you're gonna do to make people's lives better. I talk about it through the frame of the American dream, right? That you can afford more than just getting by. You can buy that first house. You can take your kids to a vacation or a ball game. You can go to the doctor when you're sick, for crying out loud. I think you're gonna support Medicare for all with me. You can retire with dignity. I mean, there is so much more than just affording your life. And I think to accomplish those things, you gotta be willing to take on the consolidated power in this country. And that's where I think you see folks who maybe aren't so comfortable, and why it's easier just to be opposed to Donald Trump. And that is just not meeting the moment. And by the way, that is not gonna meet the moment to win back the White House and the House and the Senate in 2028, even if we win it in 26.
So, leads me to my next question, which is I guess I like what I read about the Chris's policy views before I came here. I like what you guys are saying. But ultimately, my concern, I'll just say it bluntly, is Congress is dominated by the leadership. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, and eventually there might be a Democratic president, and it might be, I was going to name your governor, but we'll name somebody else who maybe is not necessarily fully on the populist train or the anti-oligarchy train right now. I'll leave the fill in the blank for which presidential candidate might fill that block. So I'm going to be blunt and ask, does it matter what the average member of the House thinks about oligarchy and corporate consolidation if the leadership isn't there? And I guess I want to be clear, I think the leadership isn't there because I read this piece before I came over here. Economic populism is not just for the left anymore. And it shows Zoran Mondani and Abigail Spanberger. I can tell you the people in Virginia do not think Abigail Spanberger and Zoran Mondani are in the same place in economic policy issues. So I want to just press that we can't continue to suggest the Spanbergers and the Zorans are in the same place, or that the Shapiros and you guys are in the same place right now. So how do you move the power in the party toward the point of views we're going to hear today?
Well, look, I think part of it is who the members of Congress are.
Does that matter?
It does matter. It absolutely matters. It matters to who sits on committees. It matters who wins leadership elections. It matters to what kind of strength the respective caucuses have. You just heard from the Progressive Caucus Chair and Greg Casar, who I came in with last term, okay? We're second-term members. He has been a strong leader of our caucus. And I think as setting the agenda, he threw out from the Progressive Caucus the affordability agenda that could be a launching off point for, a day one big Democratic caucus agenda. That matters. That is setting terms of debate, that is engaging in that debate that's gonna have to be decided in our caucus around elections of who will lead committees. So the members matter, and maybe even in another part of this, Chris, your seat was gonna be a Democrat. The question was what kind of Democrat?
Well said.
But we're having fights also in competitive seats that Democrats can win. I in the caucus endorsed Bob Brooks in the Lehigh Valley, not too far up the road from Philadelphia, as a seat that I think we're going to flip, but is one that is one of the most competitive in the country. And I think we're going to have an economic populist and labor leader in that seat as a Democrat. And so we're having these skirmishes in all kinds of districts across the country.
So one of the things that I've said repeatedly, well, for years, but certainly during the campaign trail, is there is a really important distinction between public servants and politicians. And generally speaking, politicians are folks in elective office who serve themselves and moneyed interests. And public servants serve the people and the public good. And that's a really important distinction to make. The best elected officials listen to the people. And it's easiest to listen to the people when they're screaming outside your window. So if you have thousands of people organizing, reminding elected officials, we're looking for public servants to do their job, that does influence. Maybe not as much or as quickly or as consistently as we would like, but that absolutely influences the choices of people who walk the halls of power. It's real. I would like it to be more influential, this grassroots organizing, but it has always been influential. The best elected officials are those who listen to people who have organized, who are closest to the pain. So we mentioned the New Deal and FDR earlier. It wasn't as though that came out of nowhere, right? All of this was born out of movement. I use the example of my ancestors. I'm a family historian and genealogist. So I have 16 great-great-grandparents who were born into states where slavery was the state law, and all 16 of them died free, which is an extraordinary thing. That whole generation of my grandparents' grandparents, they all died free. Most of them were owned by other people. They didn't wait for Abraham Lincoln to free them. They were organizing, they were rebelling for decades. So by the time these elected officials rose to power, they already had folks on the ground who they had to listen to for one reason or another. So part of this is, how do we use our own power as individual citizens, and collectively, how do we organize to understand the strategic inroads to make the type of change to convince even the politicians, because politicians will do the right thing, perhaps for the wrong reason, maybe just to get reelected, but they will vote the right way if there's enough political pressure for them to do so. And I believe for those of us who are coming in off of this progressive movement, we will have collective power based on the enduring nature of those who organize on the ground. And that's the type of power that may not be as much as corporate-backed folks, perhaps, maybe more, we'll see.
So I have two more questions, then we'll move to the audience, so get your questions ready as well. So I want to ask, particularly in 2025, there was three terms that I heard a lot from left-leaning people, officials, et cetera: affordability, oligarchy, abundance. So Chris, Rabb, start with you. Talk about those three. Are those words connected? Are they contradictory? Is there one of those that really resonates with you? Just take any of those three terms. Talk about
What was the first one?
Affordability,
Affordability, yes.
oligarchy,
Yes.
abundance.
So I've talked about abundance a lot because I wrote a book called Invisible Capital: How Unseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunity. And it's basically about how we need to look at our entrepreneurial class in this country and look at through the lens of abundance and also structural inequality, and not through the lens of scarcity. So that's a term I've used consistently for quite some time. Affordability is the catchword now. But the challenge with that is, it's like love. Everyone has their own definition, like, what do you do with it? And so, because it's popular now, everybody's using it, so it becomes less meaningful. If you're a corporatist or a traditional Democrat, affordability means we want you to get more money in your pocket so that you can afford the health care insurance that I don't believe we even need. We should just have health care because I'm a radical, right? So how about making the hamster wheel obsolete as opposed to slowing it down, right? You can look at affordability through multiple lenses. But if you don't talk about the structural nature of why everything is so expensive and why do we even need to pay bills that should not actually exist, then affordability is just another catchword, right? And then oligarchy, I don't use much because most people don't know the word. And I don't like to use language that confuses or distracts people. I use more colorful language that I'm not sure I'm allowed to say here, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I like to say fuckery. Everyone understands that. I mean, I'm just being authentic. This is just me. But I say that because...
I was in the Navy. You're not going to offend me with sweat.
You're not a delicate flower. Okay. So I say fuckery because everyone knows what that is, and what it is to you is different than what it is to you is what it is to you. But oligarchy, they're like, huh? Like, it's fine in certain audiences, but I want to connect authentically with folk, not talk down to them, but meet them where they are. And when you're an elected and a candidate, I have gotten better responses from people who don't necessarily agree with my politics, because I'm speaking plainly and with candor, and I've made calls to folks to raise money who voted for Trump and Mondani, because they're looking for folks to shake things up, and they want different, they want novel. I think that's kind of how we got the F word in the Senate in Pennsylvania. Novelty at the expense of substance. You saw what I did there? All right. So.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. It's funny. You can't say Chris. I mean, we're just going to vote. Okay.
Yes, and I want to be respectful to you.
I rallied with Senator Sanders at a few of the Fighting Oligarchy rallies in Harrisburg and Bethlehem and northeastern Ohio, and got this question at some point of, well, oligarchy. And I ended up having this as a line when I would talk about it, and I answered some question from the press about it. Whether you are using the word oligarchy or robber barons, or I'd say corporate jagoffs, whatever it is, people know exactly what we are talking about when you explain the problem and you say something about it, right? The title or the term, and I actually agree with you, but they know the problem. And it's not just folks in super blue districts. It is people all over the country who understand there is a consolidation of power that has wrecked the American dream and has hurt people and corrupted our politics. They know it. They know it deeply. And whatever this debate is amongst people with big brains online about the various schools of thought, the public has already decided it. They want us to take bold action to break that power and break the corruption in Washington. Not even close. When you look at any poll or you look at the results of these elections where there's some competition between these two ideas. They don't want us tinkering on the edges. And God help us if Democrats are lucky enough to take power in 2028 and don't fundamentally change things. I think people expect us to fix it and turn it around, and that's not going to happen if you're just doing some, non-refundable tax credits here and there. It's not enough.
What are two policy ideas, and I know we could name hundreds, what are two policy ideas the Democratic caucus should unify around that you want to tell this audience? I particularly love one about AI, because that's my other question I want to ask about, but I don't have time. But two policy ideas, whether it's AI or not, that we should make sure everybody watching this hears and that hopefully the Democratic Party will adopt. Chris Rabb.
I'm not even in office yet. A lot of pressure here.
You just campaigned. Hopefully you had,
Oh, I guess
I'll go on your website later. But,
There was that whole 10-month campaign. So it doesn't have to be a novel, right? It just has to be something.
Something's important more than whether it's new or not. Yeah.
Well, I think so much is being talked about with Medicare for All, and it is a something that's bigger than just healthcare. It's something that represents a greater promise and an expansive policy that impacts everything else. So I think Medicare for All is definitely one thing. But since we're talking about anti-monopoly stuff, whatever we can do to destroy media conglomerates, as someone who's connected to a family who's owned a paper for 135 years,
Which paper, brother?
it's the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. It's the oldest black family-owned newspaper in the country. My great-great-grandfather founded it. And understanding the importance of independent media and understanding that whatever it is that we talk about, whatever the policy is, the framing of that issue is going to be impacted by corporate media. And it impacts our very democracy, or what's left of it. So destroying these media conglomerates and moving towards media democracy and justice absolutely has to be a top priority, because it will, like Medicare for All, impact so many other things.
Pick up on that thread. I mean, I think in general, right, this anti-monopoly fight is one that should be pretty central for us, because it touches labor markets, it touches whether small businesses can compete, it touches the price we pay for goods and services. So I think it should be a pretty central part of this. We kicked off our Monopoly Busters caucus this Congress. And on the healthcare beat, or on the healthcare side of things, we're gonna have this big debate on the payer side of it, right? Of a public option, a Medicare for all, and that's an important debate, and you know where we stand. We should also be exploring on the provider side public options there too, to have the government, competing. And by the way, in lots of the country, in districts all over, healthcare is declining because of these stupid cuts Republicans did, and they've made a trend worse. And so, I'm a veteran, I use the VA. We have models of public options on healthcare that can compete and fill gaps, and we should be thinking about public investment on the provider side, in addition to this important debate we got to fix on the payer side.
Do we have mics for the audience, or do we need that? Okay, so people raise their hands, and if we have thousands of questions, we have to have a different plan, but how many questions? So, okay, we'll just have 2 right now, so.
Hi, Cole Cahill, I'm a reporter.
Hold on 1 second, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm Cole Cahill, I'm a reporter with Capital Forum. I've been following and covering monopoly problems and antitrust enforcement for almost 2 years. When I started, we were looking all the time at the DOJ antitrust division and the FTC. These days, we're spending most of our time, or a lot of our time, looking at state attorneys general. Throughout all of that time, in terms of concrete enforcement work and direct action, a lot of the attention hasn't been as much on Congress. So I'm curious to hear from both of you, Chris Rabb, as you're entering Congress, and Representative Deluzio, as you've been in and looking ahead to this coming term and in the future, what your intentions with a seat, from your seat in Congress on enforcement work and actions as specific as possible would be really interesting. How you see that role in taking shape.
Yeah. So I mentioned our Monopoly Busters caucus, which I launched with colleagues kind of across the ideological caucus spectrum. Pat Ryan, Angie Craig, Pramila Jayapal, which tells you something about where the broader Democratic caucus is going on the question of anti-monopoly. I think it's in the right direction. I'll give you some examples of some concrete things that we and I have taken on there. Youth sports. Anyone here who has kids who play any kind of youth sports know exactly what I'm talking about. Private equity has rolled up a lot of youth sports, and when they roll it up, they jack up the cost for people. They lock people in. They do stay-to-play schemes. They layer on junk fees. They raise the price. They push out rec leagues from facilities when they rolled them up. So Senator Chris Murphy and I, along with our Monopoly Busters caucus folks, have a bill basically getting them out of youth sports. And I should come back to the fact that we have laws on the books that have been around for a long time. Clayton Act, Sherman Antitrust Act. The courts have neutered them. And so the Congress does have to step in. I'm working on legislation to deal with the consolidation around the meat packers, which, by the way, is a big problem for why we are spending so much on beef in this country. And what the administration just did in resolving some of that litigation, I think, was very weak and inadequate to address the power imbalance there. So again, there are good laws on the books, but they're meaningless if these courts have neutered them as they think they have. And so we will continue to find places in the caucus and beyond, and we'll welcome you to help us to take on these problems, to not be at such the whim of both enforcers who seem unwilling in this administration to continue some of the decent work that was started, or courts that won't stand up, frankly, when enforcement actions come in front of them.
So, not having taken office yet, I think my perspective on this, and I take this very seriously, is how do I help increase the literacy of those folks who I represent on why these issues are so important? Because in this society, we have this false notion that we have so much choice. And then we look and it's all owned by the same family, right? Like it's nuts, but people are distracted, they're concerned, and they don't know. So I think for me, part of being a public servant is being someone who is not just good at legislation and advocacy, but also connecting the dots for busy, distracted, desperate people. And I don't like blaming, why don't you know this? That's not reasonable or decent. I like to say, this is the context in which we're struggling. This is why we're seeing these consistent narratives that push against our beliefs and our abilities to move forward, and then share information that empowers them to say, oh, this makes more sense. Now I understand why things are so expensive, why things are so hard, because people tend to individuate problems and say it's my fault. Oh, I should have done more research, or I should have this and then. It's like, no, it's systemic. So one of the things I seek to do before I join your caucus is to make sure that the folks who I will be representing have a better understanding and context for their struggles. And it's meat, it's airlines, it's healthcare, it's media, it's so many of these things that impact people's lives every day. And being able to create spaces where these conversations can happen is equally important, and that's something that can be done in partnership with other organizations on the ground who can facilitate those conversations as well.
Other questions? 2, 3, 4. Why don't we have all 4 people ask their question, and we'll sort of everybody give their question, and we'll collectively answer them in some way.
Hi.
We're out of time.
Since I've got the mic, my name's Rebecca McKinnon. I work various roles in tech policy and media policy. But my question, Chris Rabb, you talked about the importance of destroying media conglomerates and the importance of independent media. It feels that politically, this is, as you were talking about, do we talk about oligarchy or fuckery, right? That this is one of those issues, yeah, I know, among friends here. This is, the media independence, anti-monopoly also sort of has a wonk problem, getting people to really catch on to that issue and for voters to care about that issue. And I just wonder, has anybody tried using the phrase just freedom of thought when it comes to sort of this issue of breaking down monopoly power over media, and whether you think that might be a way to get beyond the wonkery?
Yeah, right in the back there. What's your question?
Hello, farmer from rural America, and my question is about affordability. And could you talk a little bit about the other issues of affordability, not just the prices that consumers have paid? Because I think there's solidarity in the farmers and the workers in what our share of the consumer dollar has been, as well as the share of the GDP that the worker gets, and also the choices, or the illusion, I should say, of choices that the consumer has in the marketplace. And I would like to see you address some of those other issues.
All right, let's probably we have 5 minutes. We'll take these 2 for now. So freedom of thought and affordability and prices. Either one of you have any?
I'll talk a little bit on agriculture and what's going on in rural America, and the way you teed it up makes a lot of sense. And look, I know in different parts of the country it's different. In my part of Pennsylvania, the farmers in my district and my part of the western part of Pennsylvania, they tend to be small businesses. These are not, consolidated big agri corporations in the way they are in other parts of the country. These are more family farms, not exclusively, but they're more small business farms in my part of the world. And I hear complaints that sound pretty similar to other ones outside of agriculture about the trade war and what that has meant for costs and their ability to pass on increases. I mean, they're not selling to consumers so much directly, but their ability to pass on those increases, which they have very limited power to do it. That meat processor, meat packer issue, I've heard about from my farmers for years, that the smaller ranchers, for instance, they get screwed. They get terms dictated to them of when their product can come in, what prices are set for them. They don't have power to negotiate. They don't have options. I've heard complaints about how hard it is to get USDA certification to do butchery and processing. That affects smaller farmers more than others because of the cost and complexity and those requirements. And that may be a different flavor of the same, or a different flavor, but it's a similar problem of size and scale and power. And the farm bill that passed out of the House that I didn't support, I think was not written for those farmers. It was written for big multinational agri-corporations. And that's what that farm bill reflected. And so we should be making very different decisions and choices about our food supply and, frankly, the small businesses who there in agriculture I think are getting squeezed every single day.
So the freedom of thought or the farms in Philadelphia. I'm sure there are. I'm sorry.
Well, look, I'm big on urban farming and sustainable farming, and I was on the ag committee for 5 terms. So even though I'm a city guy, I have great respect for agriculture and farmers. And to your point, like they're the big guys, and then there's the majority of folks who have very few workers, are small scale, but have a huge impact on our economy and on communities across our Commonwealth and beyond. I find the conservative talking points around this is that government shouldn't pick winners or losers, but that happens all the time. Those industries and businesses that we subsidize generously with our taxpayer dollars, and those we disregard. And I believe that when we talk about farmers, the vast majority of them are family farms, are small scale, but huge impact. Those are the ones that need the most resources and opportunities to flourish, because when they flourish, we all flourish. With regard to the kind of conceptual framework of freedom of thought, but it's freedom of expression, right? In the previous panel, we're talking about what things are banned or targeted by media companies, social media, what in terms of the algorithms and what videos are highlighted and what are muted. All of those things are forms of expression that people have that they want to engage with other folks and perhaps the public, that they don't realize they're being targeted for and discriminated against, and don't realize that. And that's an extension of our what many people would think are our inalienable rights. So if you maybe connect those dots, there may be some value there, because we're connecting it to bigger kind of national ideas of what does it mean to be a citizen, a resident of this country, and then connected to the very deleterious and cynical choices that corporations are making to reduce our freedoms.
That concludes the Chris's from Pennsylvania panel. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Barry.
That was a great conversation, and that's the future of the Democratic Party there. Actually, it's the present of the Democratic Party.